What's up, guys? Today on the YND show, it's a very special episode. We have two of my very close friends. One, Miss Asha Nahas. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. I fall more on the left side of the spectrum. I would probably be considered by close friends to be more liberal. And I'm here for the show to have some intellectual conversation.
Awesome. And I also have another close friend, Mr. Ethan Claus.
Hey guys, I usually tend to fall more to the right and either between authoritarian and libertarian, but I'm not strictly on either side and tend to just keep my own views.
Awesome. And so today is more of a discussion, and we might have a little bit of a debate at the end, but today we're going to be talking about Generation Z and what we're all about. And so first question is, did you guys support a specific candidate during the election? Just to have the audience get to know you a little more.
I really didn't do much research into either candidate in this election. One, because I can't vote. So
Understandable.
I didn't want to take the time to put research into something that I wasn't going to be able to vote for. But I did, notice all the stuff on social media and all of that. And I really didn't find myself identifying with any candidate particularly because I tend to be more socially liberal, but I'm fiscally more conservative.
Okay.
So I kind of fall into one of those odd man out areas.
I totally understand. As a libertarian, I kind of get you. Ethan?
Personally, when I was looking at the candidates, didn't pay much close attention until later on in the race when the candidates had been narrowed down. And pretty much I just let them do the work themselves, and I didn't do much research until it was just pretty much Clinton and Trump together.
Okay, fair enough. Did social media sway you guys at all?
For sure.
I don't have social media, so.
I think for me it was a huge factor because a huge part of personality and an indicator of character is the way that you present yourself on social media.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that having that tool definitely showed a lot about the campaign strategies for both candidates that ended up being closer in the race.
Okay, I respect that. I know I see a lot of media and I see a lot of bad Trump. I don't see a lot of good Trump, so I don't know how the media tends this way, but it definitely did. I could tell it swayed a lot of people, so it was a little interesting. So as far as since today is a Generation Z topic, how do you guys feel, especially as a high school student, how do you guys feel Generation Z is laid out? Are we more liberal? Are we more conservative? How do you guys feel we are as a generation?
I think people at this age today usually fall more left-wing just because of the way, they're raised. They're raised to, respect other people, and, that a lot of people identify that with being more on the left side. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I would say that kids our age identify mostly with extremes, and that's because we don't have a whole lot of life experience and we don't have any financial responsibility. So the most important topics to us are social topics. And people, because bearing in mind here, we do live in Southern California, we live right by LA, so we are in a very, very blue part of California.
Oh, no doubt.
And from personal experience, my dad grew up in the sticks. He grew up in the middle of nowhere, which is very red, very white supremacist type kind of area. So I think a lot of the times, because kids often parrot what their parents are telling them, they end up being really far right or really far left, and we don't really have a lot of moderate middle type opinions.
Oh, yeah.
And it also seems like, too, that kids today will do what their friends think, what's popular among their friend group, and they don't take the time to do research themselves and actually look into what they're preaching.
I do notice that a lot. Like, you do see cliques at school that, like, if you see, like, for a girl group or a guy group, they always lean, to the right or to the left. Typically girls lean more to the left, guys to the right. You guys kind of know what cliques I'm talking about.
Right.
And I think it's kind of interesting because I know I went to Politicon last year, and there was a lot of conservatives there. I was shocked. It was actually weird. Do you think, as far as our generation compared to millennials, are we a completely different generation? Like, are we less liberal than them?
I would say we grew up in a different time. We definitely grew up in the digital age as much as millennials did kind of have that. So we have a lot more exposure to social media. And to touch on that a little bit more, people who are more left-leaning have sources that are more left-leaning because those are the people they follow. So, and because you're a kid, you're only going to follow the people who you think are right and you think are cool. You're not going to follow the other people. So we often don't see the perspective of the other side, whereas millennials kind of grew up, under the No Child Left Behind, multiple choice answers, the whole You're going to do everything. How do I phrase this? When you answer a question, when someone asks you a question, they're looking for an answer. They're not looking for what you think.
Yeah.
Whereas our generation kind of got caught between No Child Left Behind and Common Core.
Would you say we're more, because of the internet age, more in a like political echo chamber?
I think we fall down the Wikipedia rabbit hole a lot easier than millennials do.
I know I use that on essays, so.
So we definitely have easier access, and we are raised in a way that leads us to question things and leads us to want to learn more, whether that's to be right or whether it's for the sake of knowledge.
And also on the social media tangent too, you're connected to everybody.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of different viewpoints, and it may seem like everybody's just waiting at a chance to criticize you as well. So
Yes.
that can play a large part in what people reveal on social media, how they give their opinions and so forth.
That's true. And the weird thing about our generation is coming up, we're going to be the first one. This is going to be our first, time to vote. How do you think we're going to play a role? Do you think we'll vote Trump 2020 if that happens? Like, how will we affect the next, coming elections? Because this will be our time to shine.
I heard Kanye was going to run 2020, but
He may win on Celebrity Power.
yeah.
I think Kendrick would like that a little bit.
Yeah, I think definitely this generation, maybe in opposition to the baby boomers, they definitely are more recluded from voting because they don't think that it makes a difference. They think that if I go in and vote, it's just one person, and 2 million other people. It doesn't matter, you're voting at the same time as all these other people. So they tend to side with more. I guess the word I'm looking for is visual, like acts of their stance instead of just on paper.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely we are a lot more cynical as a generation, I think, than millennials, because millennials are definitely more of the participation trophy type of kids. And our generation kind of grew up with that stapled to our backs, with people saying, well, you don't get a trophy, you're not special, and you're not a snowflake.
Yeah.
So we were taught from a very young age, seeing people, like, because I have cousins who are millennials, seeing them get all of those participation trophies and then watching that fade out and watching that trend fade, and going from, being younger and having, oh, you participated, you get a ribbon, to like, what are you talking about? You're not special. So we kind of had that hope instilled in us from a young age, and that was dashed. So because of that cynicism, I think we're definitely more hesitant to put ourselves out there, and therefore to vote, because we feel like we're not going to be taken seriously.
Yeah, that's definitely like a parental thing too.
Yes.
Like your parents raise you, you can have all this stuff just because you want it,
Yeah.
You have to work at it, but that's not the main factor, And so once you get into the real world, you figure out you're not special, you can't get everything you want just because you want it. And so that, that kind of hits a lot of young people hard.
It's a reality check.
Yeah.
For sure.
I feel like our generation is more of like a perfectionist generation,
Yes.
where if nothing is perfect, we won't go after it, or
Right,
if a scenario isn't like the ideal, we're not going to go after it.
There can be no caveat, exactly.
Yeah, and I feel like you need the in-between, you need the gray area in order to succeed, and that's kind of what's holding us back, is that just because Hillary or Trump wasn't perfectionist, or they weren't the perfect ideal of the Republican or Democrat Party, we wouldn't vote. And that's why I think we do have, an election that went, completely different from the polls.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's odd, but so now to get more into what you guys see as a little bit apart from Generation Z, but I'll start with Asha. How do you view, as a Generation Z, how do you view other Generational Z Republicans? Like, what do you think of the party? What do you think of them?
I think that there's nothing wrong with having opinions. You have a right to have your opinion. You have a right to express those opinions. I think that the way we express them sometimes is what needs to change.
Okay.
And I think because we were taught in school that we just don't talk about politics. When you're in the classroom, that's not something you talk about. You never learn how to have a civil, intellectual debate. So we just start slinging insults at each other.
Yeah.
And say, you're wrong.
Yeah, I definitely think I see that a lot. Especially, I don't know about, we don't have a lot of arguments on our campus, but I think college campuses that happens way more often than it should.
For sure. And I think that changes the way that we view each other and that we perceive each other.
Exactly.
And for me personally, because I am more of a constitutionalist than anything, because that's how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at the way people view things, it's not about whether or not I like it. It's about whether or not you have the right to say that.
True.
So my kind of personal guideline rules are, is it helpful? Is it harmful? You know, why are you saying that? I want to know why. I want to know where you're coming from. I want to fact check you. I want to know the logic behind it and the way that you think about it.
So going under, since you are, I'm going to ask a couple hard questions for you. Since you are a constitutionalist, and I appreciate that, let's just even start with the First Amendment. Would hate speech count as free speech?
I think that it's a gray area, and the amendments were written to be vague for that reason specifically.
Yeah.
So that it's to protect the people, right?
Yeah.
So my personal guideline is you can say whatever you want, but know that there are repercussions for those words.
Okay.
So if you're going to be racist, people are going to push back at you for that.
Yeah, society's not going to like that.
If you're going to express your views, if you're going to throw stones in a glass house, you're going to get pushback from that. So my thing with the First Amendment is say whatever you want, but no, there's repercussion for those words. You have the right to say it. I don't have to agree with you, and I don't have to be nice to you.
Do you think society kind of has like an invisible hand on people and what they say? Because I do notice on social media a lot people do get branded as bigots, xenophobic and stuff like that for certain comments. Do you think society more has an invisible hand about what people say, and that like they kind of shun you if you are labeled that?
I think that we don't really know what all those words mean.
Okay.
I think that we have our textbook definitions.
We kind of lost the definition.
And we throw words around, but we don't actually know what those words mean. So I can call you a blanket racist.
Yeah.
But why? Why am I saying that? That's what's important to me. It's the intent behind it. If you're just going to look at somebody because they're Republican and all you know is they're Republican or they're conservative and say, well, you're a racist because you're conservative, that's just uneducated.
Yeah.
You can't make that statement about somebody until you've observed their behaviors and observed the way that they speak about things. And I think that our generation is very, very quick to label.
Yes. I think so too. And so, Ethan, how do you view Generational Z, liberals, and Democrats and the party itself?
I think what's ironic is that a lot of the time we agree on stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just differences in maybe, background or, even stupid stuff like education.
Yeah, like
creates this humongous, stuff like that. Creates this humongous barrier. And I think that there's a lot of pressure to make sure you don't hurt anybody's feelings. But the fact behind it is that if you're not, you can't incite change and you can't do what you believe in, you can't try and help others. If you don't along the way, you're gonna end up
making people uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I just think that it's important that on maybe especially school campuses, we make sure that students are able to talk about how they feel and what they think is right, because I think it's so obvious that students are almost afraid to talk about what they believe, for fear of being reprimanded or, accused or, like Asha brought up, called racist or just for having a simple straw man argument.
So do you think, in addition to that, since assuming you lean more to the right, you like freedom of speech and everything. Mm-hmm. So to combat the, I guess the reprimanding, should we have like a safe space zone? Because I have heard a lot of that has happened. I want to see your take on that, because I know certain groups on the left are proactively wanting that. How do you feel?
Pretty simply, I guess, just to say that I don't think a safe space is necessary, just because you should be able to talk about stuff freely, and your feelings are subjective too. So one thing that will offend somebody will not offend somebody else. So a safe space is totally unattainable per se. Yeah. And so someone's always going to be seeking for that next safest place. Yeah. So on and so forth.
Okay, I can totally respect that, and I'm glad you guys actually like each other. No, I think it's cool that I see, a lot of the times on social media and at school, you hear a lot of bad from, a certain, like the Republicans at our school. You hear them talk a lot of crap about the liberals, and you hear the liberals talk a lot of crap about certain Republicans. And so I think it's nice that when you have, two actual civil people, they can have a conversation about it instead of just throwing insults and, seeing people who, wind up on YouTube being called racist.
Yeah,
and they
exactly.
Get owned by
That's a good
some
point.
Debater. I think it's kind of nice that, I think our generation is more adept to actually debating and having facts on hand compared to millennials and in some cases baby boomers who seem more ignorant and more I just pledged to one party or the other for my whole life.
Yeah. And I think we also have to move out of this area, this brick wall where we just accuse people of being something without actually getting to know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I think research is a big deal. And actually, for this show, I did a big research project. So I combined almost 40 data points onto a political compass. I had 40 people separately take the test. And from that, I found, at least in this local area, 76% of all the guys tested were to the right of the spectrum economically, whereas 89% of girls were left.
Yeah.
So that discrepancy, I feel like that's a big discrepancy, but 90% of people or more, give or take a few percentage points, were libertarian. So I think we're now at an age where we accept, even heavy conservatives at this age accept gay marriage and accept even if you want to get into like really risque abortion rights, we're probably the most accepting generation regardless compared to anybody else.
I think that's really true, because our generation was raised with the you respect other people as you want to be respected. That was a very big part of the way that we grew up, I think, as a whole. And I think the reason that women and men differ so much economically is because women are, whether you like it or not, a majority oppressed group. We didn't start out with the right to vote, and in Congress, in the House of Representatives, we are underrepresented. Most of our laws are written by old white men. So, economically speaking, we want the causes that we support to be supported, and we know if we don't do that, no one else will. Women in this generation are tired of letting other people make decisions for them. So I think that it's found most often that we tend to kind of throw that fear of being judged and of being ostracized aside when we go into the polls and we decide, if I don't do this for myself, no one else is going to.
Do you think now we have equal rights, or do you think there is still a process to equal rights for men and women?
I think that we have equal rights. I don't think that in some places we are viewed as equal.
Okay, are you talking like other countries, like Saudi Arabia and the Middle East?
Other countries for sure. I mean, you look at third world countries even where we have huge problems. But in America even as well, women, and this is something I've grown up with in my own household. My father is very much an alpha male. Lots of testosterone in my family. And they're very backhanded misogynists. So, and not in the way where they're going to tell you to go into the kitchen and do the dishes, but all the men go into the living room and sit down and leave their plates out. So
it's kind of like a shadow, or
it's very much so. And I think as our generation gets older and we kind of shift to being the more prominent people in society, that will start to change. Because we tend to be more, women now are more, hey, that's not cool. And we're more willing to call people out on that. So I think it's kind of residual left over from baby boomers, from that kind of that time period of mom stays home and cooks and cleans, and dad comes home from work, and we have a nice family dinner with a white picket fence. And we're moving away from that as we get older, I think. So I think our rights legally are pretty fair, but the way that we are perceived is not necessarily matching that legal right.
Ethan?
Well, let me think. The first thing you said, definitely about being, let me think about how to phrase this. You said, first of all, you said women are a minority. Is that what you said?
Majority oppressed group.
Okay, yeah. Because I was going to say, yeah, that's true. Because women are actually sexually the majority of people in America. And I think that, I think that it's women, like rights for women have come a very long way. I think we're at a good place today. Yeah. I think also that just saying that, there are issues in the past doesn't really make a difference because they've been solved. We're past that. We're at a new point as we are today. So yes, it has been in the past, but saying that they're I guess the word used, oppressed, I couldn't agree with that today just because of how different it is from when they actually were oppressed, Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the phrase internalized misogyny?
Probably not like in that phrasing.
So basically what that means is that from the way that we have our media set up, you internalize certain concepts from the things that you view and the things that you process from the outside social world. So women, our models for behavior are, when you're in the grocery store, when you're a little kid at eye level and they have all those magazines, the women on the front of the magazines are Cosmo. We've got bikini covers. We've got recipes with women on the front of them. Things that are kind of traditionally viewed as female traits. Men have sports. They have baseball. They have all of these other quote-unquote manly things. So this works not just for women but for men. But we have internalized social roles that are exposed to us via the media and via our parents and their own views, that it has to do with the way that you grew up. So whatever family you come from, say like in my family, the worst two things that you can be are ugly and fat, right? We'll just say that. So even though my mother is a very empowered woman and she's powerful and she's strong and she's all these things, because of the way that she grew up, she has internalized all of these outside messages and still has severe insecurity about her weight and about the way that she comes off to people when she speaks, because she was constantly criticized for being too loud and too strong and too bossy, which is something that women often grow up having a hard time with. And through that, with me growing up seeing my mom be hypercritical of herself for those things, my model for my behavior was my mother, I started to internalize those things as well. So I think that there is not necessarily overt oppression, but it's in the way that we process things that are exposed to us as young children.
Okay, so you believe that like the magazines like Cosmo and all that stuff is internalized misogyny. I'm just trying to...
It's a factor, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, just pointing on or going off this what you were talking about. A lot of, like you said, male like attributes in these magazines. You know, they're athletes. They're in fantastic shape, and that's sort of like the same thing is pushed towards men. So I don't think it's just women that have these, you know, sort of societal
standards.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
And I also think that to call it maybe misogynistic may not be accurate, just because in that sense it's portraying that, okay, they're trying to get a message across. Really, you know, that may just be what sells.
But I think that part of the issue is that misogyny does sell. The same thing for men, which is an issue. So real true feminist issues, right? We're going to kind of step into some more dangerous waters here. Do not just affect women. They affect men as well. So the way that men are perceived as being these strong, macho guys that aren't allowed to cry and aren't allowed to talk about their feelings, that's harmful for men. It's harmful for you guys to grow up thinking that you can't express your emotions and you have to bottle them up and internalize everything. So that is an example of a harmful stereotype that men have to grow up battling constantly.
Can I interrupt you? Or...
Go
Okay,
for it.
so I disagree on that, just because you know, when you look back 1,000 years, men had to, you know, they had to survive. They had to, a lot of the times they were the hunters in the family. They had to really, you know, provide for their family essentially, and that was life or death for them. So I don't think that's you know, necessarily a bad thing. Now, like, expressing your emotions is obviously something that everybody should be able to do and not be looked down upon for it, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, that men are raised to be tough and to be resilient, and, you know.
If I may interject really quick.
Please.
Going on the magazine point, I'm just a little confused. So when like with your magazine examples, I guess, when you had like Cosmo, and if you have like the cooking magazines, and then you have like the baseball magazines, I feel I'm a little confused on how it's misogyny when the prime people who buy certain magazines that you know have the flashy woman or the women that are chefs are women, and like how does that work? Because I know like I don't know any guys, any adult men that buy Cosmo or Cooking at Home or Food Network, but I do know like women who buy all of those, and then men stick traditionally to the sports.
So the point that is making is that those magazines are geared toward women, right?
Yeah.
That's the consumer base.
Okay.
So if within those magazines you grow up reading those and those are pushed towards you, you see all of the messages that they're putting across to you, and those messages that they send, as someone who personally reads Cosmo, it's not something, being a businesswoman is not stressed in Cosmo. Being in science is not stressed in Cosmo, in fields that are generally more male dominated. is not something that you see in those magazines.
What do you view Cosmo magazine as? Like, what would you say they're trying to get from their magazine? Are they just a general, like... Because I know I've seen their Snapchat story, and it's mostly revolved around sex, if I'm not correct.
Exactly.
So would they have to push them, or would that be in a different magazine, I guess?
It's an entertainment magazine.
Okay.
So...
I don't read it, so you kind of have to tell me.
The purpose that it serves is to entertain, and the fact that it is seen that the thing that entertains women is sex and beauty is inherently misogynistic. Because what if I like science? What if I like sports? I can still be a woman. I can still be feminine. Or maybe I'm a woman and I'm not feminine.
Okay.
And I think the fact that what's marketed towards us is most consistently, how to cook this dish, like how to have great sex. Like that's what's in our magazines. How to start a business in 3 weeks. Startups are not something that are generally geared towards women, although a lot of women do participate in them because we often have a hard time getting into that industry just because of our own personal, the way that we feel about it.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not, the way that we feel about it. So it's easier for us to start our own companies and work for ourselves because we don't want to put ourselves into that uncomfortable situation of being rejected.
Okay.
Because we're taught that that's a horrible thing for everyone. So I think that it is hard to be a woman who wants to be something more than an expert on sex and whatever's in those magazines because that's what's geared toward us.
Yeah.
But women can still buy Business Insider if that's what they're, curious about. I think that if you look at something like Cosmo or something like Victoria's Secret, like women are buying these products, right? These are for women. So obviously, they're the way that they sell these items and these pieces of clothing and everything, it's made so that it appeals to women. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's necessarily a misogynistic thing per se. There are definitely magazines that are, but I don't think you can sort of encompass this whole thing as just sex and just, beauty and just those things.
So to elaborate more on that and kind of clarify what I'm trying to say, because I'm getting a little lost in the sauce here.
And we haven't even started debating.
Oh, I know. When you grow up as a girl, in my personal experience, I have been told you hit like a girl, you throw like a girl, and you are not... My parents never asked me, oh, do you want to look at this sports magazine? Like, that was never an option. So you kind of grow up and it's like, these are for girls, these are for boys. It's like when you go into Target and they have the boys side and the girls side, like this is for girls, this is for boys. Mm-hmm. And you have this kind of set little parameter, this little box that you have for your own stuff, and the boys have their own little separate box for their own stuff, and there's no mixing because that's what it's always been. And so I think part of moving through this is to break those barriers and to say, you know what, you can do whatever you want. As long as you're not hurting anybody, you can be whoever you want. And it starts really young because little girls in tutus are cute. That's fun to look at. But little boys in tutus are fill in the blank. I'll give you a hint, the word's not cute.
Yeah.
So that is harmful for both people. And you're kind of cut off, I think, from those other... I'm kind of cut off from boys' magazines. I was never like, Business Insider. Like, that's what I'm going to choose to read today. Because I was never exposed to it. I know nothing about stocks and bonds. I've started to learn more about that as I've gotten older, and I found myself becoming interested in it. But because I was never exposed to it, it was never something that I pursued. Same thing with science. As I got older, I learned more about it. But when I was younger, it wasn't something I pursued because it was never exposed to me. So I think what I'm trying to touch on more is exposure of traditionally masculine jobs and traditionally masculine items to young women is important in making well-rounded young women, and exposure to feminine products, and not like tampons, but you know what I'm talking about, like feminine style of things to men makes well-rounded men, and it creates a better understanding of everyone. Okay.
If I was just to talk about one point from that, I would just talk about the fact that the women in my family, my dad, my parents are divorced, my dad lives, by himself, and I live with my mom and my sister. So that's what I'm surrounded by. And both of them like sports. Like if I'm playing a basketball game on TV or something, they're still interested. But I think that assuming that that's something that little girls should grow up, exposed to. If you put, for example, sports. If you put, a female fighter in the octagon with a male fighter, there's not a huge margin of who would win that. And that's just clearly, that's not like a misogynistic thing. That's not a sexist thing. That's biology.
There.
Yeah, exactly. And so, testosterone tailors our body to,
stronger, faster,
right,
stuff like that.
Yeah, build muscle and, that whole thing. Men have lower amounts of body fat naturally than women just because muscle takes up more of our body. So you can see the clear biological differences there.
So are you trying to kind of get at the whole, like, you throw like a girl? Like, is that where it came from?
Well, I just think that, if you put a woman and a man next to each other and they both punch a bag and there's a meter saying how much force is behind the bag, the man will have more force. That's just the way it'll be. Well, yeah, I mean there's some unless the woman's a freak of nature. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's obviously the sheer minority of women that participate in sports are these competitors,
super athletes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely have. From the left point of view, I have an unpopular opinion because I do definitely believe that we are biologically hardwired differently.
Yeah.
Women cannot do the same things that men can do, and men cannot do the same things that women can do just because of what we are biologically engineered for. So, in the same way that you guys have big muscles and you are strong macho men who can punch things and move doors, we tend to have more quote-unquote feminine traits, like we can have babies. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a thing that I can do that you can't do. I should hope. So, I definitely think that from the left, one of the issues that we have is trying to... Women and men are equal, but they're not the same. And I think trying to say that they're the same is a huge problem.
I think they're confusing the two definitions.
Yeah, and I also think that when you're going to talk about the differences between men and women biologically, there's obviously babies, right? There's obviously that, and that's when I personally I start to think, okay, well, being a stay-at-home mom, for example, I know this is a touchy subject, but is not all that bad because you're genetically engineered to have a baby, take care of a baby, just the way you're made. So as a female. So I'm not saying that women have to be stay-at-home moms. I'm just saying as primary carers of children, that's usually what needs to happen just because, men can't breastfeed. And the day that happens will be a miracle.
And you're right. Psychologically and biologically speaking, infants form closer bonds with their mothers because of
they're
that
more
time
caring,
spent breastfeeding. Yeah. And I think that because we have these particular hormones and all of those things, that does lend us to be more natural caretakers, and that is a strong suit of women. But the issue is, like you said, not that you believe that all women should be stay-at-home moms, but from a lot of the pushback that we get for being stay-at-home moms is, well, why are you a stay-at-home mom? You could go out and get a job from other women. That comes a lot from other women because there's a lot of working moms out there.
Oh yeah, my mom's one of them.
So it's definitely interesting to see the way that women perceive other women and how we kind of are a little more catty than men are. You guys are more straightforward and you're more of a, if I have a problem with you, I'm going to tell you about it.
Yeah, we kind of pick fights a lot.
And women, because we are, I'm generalizing here. I'm a bad feminist, I'm generalizing. But because we tend to be more emotional and we are more sensitive to people's emotions, that original thought is, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And then it's, well, I don't want to expose myself to them and get my feelings hurt. And then it's, well, can I swear?
Go ahead. We're not on.
And then it's, well, she's a fucking bitch, and I hate her, and I'm going to talk shit about her behind her back because I don't agree with what she's saying, which stems from that insecurity of, I don't want to get my feelings hurt because she doesn't like me. So I think it's definitely interesting to see the dynamics between women, and that's a thing that definitely needs to change in the same way that the way men talk to women changes and women talk to men. The way that women talk to each other needs to be in a supportive, uplifting way.
Yeah.
So, because men talk to each other that way.
Oh, men will talk smack. We do. Yeah. We don't really have bars.
You do talk smack, but if your buddy gets a promotion...
Oh, yeah. we're partying, we're hyping them up.
Whereas women, if your girlfriend gets a promotion, you're like, oh well, she's so focused on work, she never spends any time with her kids, and
it's more of a judgmental.
It's
side.
Definitely more judgmental, and that needs to change.
So psychologically, we are different, I would think.
But then again, when you talk about saying that women think this of other women in juxtaposition to men thinking about this about other men, it's not a sexist thing, because sexism is a blatant disregard and saying that okay, the opposite gender is
inherently worse.
Yeah, fragile. Yeah. Whatever you want, whatever adjective you want to use. It's not a sexist thing. It's a inter-female thing. It's between females, and so you can't say that that's sexist and men are to blame for that.
Oh no, they're not. But
I know you're not saying.
Yeah, I know you're not saying that. I'm saying that.
Right.
If that makes sense. Internalized misogyny most commonly affects women, which is the point I'm trying to make. Men don't have internalized misogyny. If they're misogynists, they're blatant about it.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah.
But women have internalized misogyny because of this kind of catty, she works, she doesn't care about her kids. That's internalized misogyny.
Well, I get what you're saying, but a lot of feminism has gone from equality, this movement of equality to females are just as good, if not better than men, which the former is true, but I think they're both equal. But it's moved into this, obviously,
men are trash.
Yeah, men are trash, and art to should be and art to blame for all of the injustices caused to women. Well, whereas today, once we've taken this giant leap forward, as per se 60 years ago, there's very little sexual harassment. There's more,
So if I may use this as a springboard into the actual debate, because I love hearing you guys agree, but I do want to hear your debate. Why don't we start actually debating third wave feminism, and that'll be our first topic. The ideas, because you do see there's videos online about third wave feminism, and you see the people with the colored hair. Not anything against it, but that's they have the colored hair and they say men are trash, blah blah blah. Like they have all these slurs. How do you feel like? I know you are a feminist. Do you think it hurts your image? How do you feel as a guy hearing that?
Yeah, well, that's obviously ridiculous to take a brush and then paint all of men the same way. But I think that that is probably the minority of feminists.
Yeah, we call them TERFs.
Okay, yeah, I've never heard that term before.
Okay.
But I think that it does hurt. The entire feminist movement is a way, because now, just because of the small percentage, the entirety of feminism is seen as being these people. These are the worst case scenarios. These are all the videos on YouTubes of, quote unquote feminism and how terrible it is. And I definitely think that, first wave feminists are, they have a good cause, and they're
first
trying.
And second were essential.
Exactly, yeah. But third wave feminism is just attention. And it's just, screaming all this stuff because they don't feel like we talked about earlier, like they're safe. They don't feel like these are the people that, didn't get hit hard enough, and they still want what they want all the time just because they want it.
Okay.
I think that it's a very small minority that is very loud.
Okay,
So in the same way, when you look at conservatives who are just conservative and conservatives who are, blatantly racist and blatantly all of these things, that is a small minority of Republicans that are just louder than everyone else.
I mean, they're not really a minority in the South, but we'll kind of...
But, But here.
Yeah.
We'll stay
here.
local.
Here, they're,
Those kind of men are trash feminists are my least favorite type of feminists, because that doesn't help anyone.
I wouldn't even classify them as feminists.
Well, they're not saying anything.
I wouldn't say that either.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of feminism today, we have a long way to come as a movement. Feminism has a lot of work to do with working on intersectionality, and working for rights for not just white cisgender women, but for women of all colors and of all sexualities, and women who are trans.
Okay.
And things like that, that I call it Taylor Swift brand feminism just doesn't represent.
Yeah.
So do you...
Wow.
When you say that, do you mean that feminism, the movement itself, has a long way to come, or society has a long way to come to accompany feminism?
Feminism itself has a long way to come.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can agree with that.
So as an idea, in fact, not to cut you off, but I know a big ideological tenet in feminism is the wage gap. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of controversy around it. how do you feel? Like, I know some people don't believe it. I know a lot of people do. Is it real? Like, give me a pointer on it.
The way that the wage gap works, which a lot of feminists don't take the time to look into, is women statistically take longer leave when they have kids.
Okay.
So they are paid less because they take longer leave.
Yeah.
Another factor in that is women are less often in higher paying positions.
Okay.
So because they're in these lower paying positions, they make less money.
And that is a result of women are less likely to ask for raises than men are.
Yeah. So would you contribute? Because I did research on this one time where it says the whole 72 cents on the dollar is more like, I think 90 if you actually account for it, because you the whole math involved was taking everything men earned, everything women earned, and then doing simple like division or something like that. Would you say that if there is a wage gap, it is the 90 cents on the dollar, or how would you view it if there is one?
Well,
because all the factors are lining up as you say.
There is no like value, right? Because that would mean like the 77 cents on the dollar, 90 cents on the dollar. I think it's all subjective, right?
Okay.
To where you are in the corporate ladder per se, and how much time you take off work, like you talked about. Women are more likely to, if they're less likely to work overtime, and they're more likely to, go to their son's soccer game, something like that.
Okay.
Men are, more used to and are
as a norm.
Right. Yeah.
Working
they tend to take overtime. They tend to ask for raises. They tend to even pursue these higher paying jobs within a field.
Okay.
And I think that that's all true. That's all statistically correct. And statistics are very tricky because you can make numbers say whatever you want them to say.
Yeah.
And the issue with the wage gap is the reason why women don't ask for raises. And the reason why women take more time off. Because as young women, and I experience, me,
yes.
I'm very assertive.
Yes.
And when I was younger...
You probably have more balls than me sometimes.
When I was younger, it was always, well, you're being bossy.
Yeah.
And that was always a bad thing. So I was always... My dad especially was always, well, you just talk too much. You're just too loud. You just had too many opinions. Whereas when my brothers expressed the same dissension and the same amount of, words, we'll say, to put it simply, they didn't receive that same feedback.
Okay.
So that is something that I personally grew up with, and I also think that women are more likely to take time off because that bond between a mother and a child is biologically really, really important. Whereas between obviously a father and a child is still important and still a huge deal and developmentally a great part of the child's life. It's not the same as literally being biologically dependent on your mother's milk to survive. Yeah. So it's an interesting topic because, when we look at how much Hispanic women make to white women, and who they make significantly less because statistically speaking, Hispanic women are more likely to have more kids.
Yeah.
And they're immigrants, especially, this is not just Hispanic immigrants, but all immigrants who come here illegally or legally start at base 0.
Yeah.
So socioeconomically, they're at a disadvantage. So they get less education, so they get not quite as high paying jobs. And because they're immigrants, they make less money as a factor. So it's not the fact that because you're Hispanic, you get paid less. It's the fact that you came from a socioeconomic disadvantage because of where you come from, and that's why you're not predisposed to those higher paying jobs.
Yeah.
Whereas education for women has become more and more important as the years have passed. So the baby boomer generation, the highest education anyone got was a high school diploma.
Yeah.
Whereas, for women especially, the fields that they pursued were not the same educationally. A lot more women went to trade school than went to college.
Yeah.
So as that culture changed and we are now geared much, much more towards education, I think our generation will have a lot more women in the workforce.
Which I agree with too. And when you go back to the wage gap as a theory, you'd have to say, okay, if women were going to have to get paid less, right? So if a woman and a man are, if they're applying for the same job and there's only one open position, right? That would be like saying, okay, for every dollar you make, I will offer her 77 cents. That's like him making minimum wage and her not.
So a lot of business owners would hire women instead of men, is what you're trying to say?
Well, I mean, it's actually the reverse.
theory,
Just
reverse.
because it's the reverse because men are, like we talked about earlier, more likely to stay overtime. So because of the time that they're paying these men opposed to women, in the time that they're paying these men are doing, more work. They're staying longer. They're more committed to their career per se, and they don't have to focus on as much.
Okay.
And on that note, there's definitely social pressure for men to stay at work and work longer hours, and to provide and be the breadwinners of the family. That is a very American tradition.
Oh yeah.
Whereas
it's
for
the American
women,
dream.
there's social pressure to go home and have dinner ready for your husband when he's home from work. So I think that also has a factor in the way that we approach corporate ladder-like climbing, which is a horrible way of saying that. Women are less likely to climb the corporate ladder because of the social pressures. And it's not directly social pressures, but it's just because that's kind of how we're raised.
Okay.
So that's something that, again, is disappearing more and more and more as our generation gets older.
Yeah, I think we're more accepting of like women in the workforce.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think we see it anymore as a like threat to men, or I see it as anything other than, okay, just do what you want.
Yeah, I don't think there is a wage gap. I think there's a quantity of work gap, just because of these different roles that women will, I'm not going to stay overtime. I'm going to, go home and play with my son Jim.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to another, I'll do one more point of feminism, then I'll move to a completely different topic.
That's fine.
Since we want to get really in depth, how about we talk about abortion?
Okay.
And I know your stance is my body, my choice.
Yes, I'm pro-choice.
So I don't know yours yet, Ethan. So inform me of how you feel.
Well, here's the thing, because it is, there's no way around it. You are, killing a child. Now, it is the woman's choice, technically.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to tell you that it's not, but I think it's very cruel. Because if I were to, make an analogy, it's like somebody who doesn't have any immediate family in a hospital, right? And they're laying there in the hospital bed, and they're in a coma, they can't take care of themselves. That's like the hospital making the executive decision to, pull the plug. It may be up to the hospital, but that doesn't make it any less cruel than
Moral.
it is. Right, exactly.
Okay.
And I don't think that it's a logical argument. I think it's definitely an ethical argument.
Okay.
It's definitely like, okay, the woman does have the choice. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right to take the life of a kid. Even no matter, I don't think it, no matter what trimester you're in, what part of pregnancy you're in, I don't think it makes it right.
You think life begins at conception?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think pretty much as soon as it happens, everything is living, right? It all has, and not only that, it all has potential as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So there are two stances that I take on this. The first is my constitutional standpoint, which is we have bodily autonomy.
Okay.
Which means that even if I am dead, if I don't sign a paper that says you can take my organs, you can't take them from me.
Okay.
Now, if I say you can't inject a shot into my body, if you don't have my consent to inject me with a shot, you cannot inject that shot into my body.
Yeah.
So legally, I have the right to bodily autonomy, therefore it's my body, I can do whatever I want with it. That's the legal constitutional standpoint.
Yeah.
My emotional standpoint is, are you religious? Question. Did you grow up religious at all?
I guess if I consider myself, I did grow up religious, but myself, I'm pretty much agnostic. I don't take a stance because I don't think that's as important as other things.
Okay. So I think that it's a tricky subject. It's very ethically complex, and there is a lot of gray area. So the way that I approach it is, I don't see abortion as killing a child before the second trimester.
Okay.
I personally think that if you are in a position where you know that giving birth to that child is going to be a worse life for them, then like if you are poor,
okay,
and you're a prostitute, right, and you get pregnant, or you're raped and you get pregnant, and
which is usually what happens with abortion cases.
It's a little bit of everything. Most rapes that end in pregnancy are abortions because why would you want to have a baby by a rapist?
Right, that makes sense.
That
yeah,
makes
I can understand that.
But as a woman, you don't want to bring a child into a world that you can't bear yourself. So for me, that's a decision that you make personally. You decide, do I want to bring a kid into this world? Do I want to bring another life? Am I responsible enough to give this kid the kind of life that I think that they should live? Do I know that I can provide for this child? Okay. Do I know that I can afford to get them clothes for school? That I can afford to put food on the table? Or maybe I'm 16. Maybe I'm 16 and I'm supposed to go away to college, and what am I going to do with a kid?
Yeah.
Teen pregnancies are devastating because of the time that you have to put into raising that child.
You have to stop everything.
Your whole entire world stops. So you have to decide, do I want to put my whole entire life into this at 16? And some women say, yes, I do. And some women say, I know that if I don't have this baby, I can go to college and I can get my education. And when I'm older and I'm ready for a kid, I can still have one if I want to. And it's not to spite that child that you didn't have. It's not to kill that body that's inside of you. It's not done with malicious intent. It's being selfish and saying, you know what, I know this isn't right for me. And if it's not right for you, the only thing you're going to harbor is spite.
Yeah.
When you look at that kid, you're going to remember, well, I didn't get to go to college. I didn't get to finish my education. I didn't get to work because I was home with a baby. And whether we like it or not, those are all things that go through your head. And so that's my personal thing is it's a huge gray area. There's a lot of things and questions that we can't answer, and people who are religious have a much different standpoint on people who are atheist. I grew up atheist. Neither of my parents are religious, so I have a very different standpoint than a lot of people do. And when it boils down to it, when I come into an argument where it's talking about whether we are legally we can take, the right to have an abortion away, I say no, we cannot legally take that away because you have bodily autonomy, it's your body, it's your choice. You don't have to agree with that choice, but you have to respect that you have the right to make it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but at the same time too, if it was not legal, right, there would be still a good number of people finding messier ways to do it,
and more people would get hurt.
Right, it's more of an accommodation because of it. I think that abortion too is a big thing, like you mentioned, like the 16-year-old pregnancies, right, like young kids having kids. But that usually stems from irresponsibility, and birth control, they don't use that. They're just irresponsible. So I don't think that even though it's not an intentional murder, it is still taking the life of a child. Okay. And I think that there's enough chance to wear a condom or use birth control or just abstain. There's all these chances, and so I don't think because you were irresponsible. I know kids will be kids, but I don't think that's because you are irresponsible, you just have this right to just, take it. Right, yeah. And at the end of the day, I think it's cruel, and it will always be cruel to just take the life of a kid, no matter what your intent is.
Yeah. Well, for me, as a woman and knowing other women and having this conversation with women who are religious and women who are pro-life, no woman ever wants to have an abortion. No woman ever wants to do that. It is an internal feeling of guilt and shame to know that the one thing that you are genetically engineered to do, that your one true biological job is to have babies, and because you fucked it up, you have to say, well, I don't do that. Right? You have to take a pill, or you have to have someone go into your cervix with a pair of tongs and remove a fetus from you. That's not something anyone ever wants to do. It's a matter of, this is something I have to do. I have no other choice because I know, I can't afford to give birth. Giving birth is super expensive. My parents had home births. We weren't even in a hospital, and each birth cost them $5,000. Do you have $5,000 to have a baby right now?
No, not right away.
And then diapers, and then the crib, and the nursery, and the car seat, and the stroller,
right?
Daycare if
Kids
you
are
have to work,
expensive.
if you have to have a job.
It's a responsibility. You're taking care of another life, but you had plenty of chance to be smart about it initially.
But kids aren't a punishment.
No,
for having
kids.
sex.
Kids are not a punishment, though. But abortions treat having a child as a punishment. I got to get this thing out of me. It's this or my success or have a child.
I think that. Oh, let me collect my thoughts here, or I'm gonna be all over the place.
It's fine. He can edit it out.
Yeah, I can edit this all out.
This is a touchy topic.
Do you want to
for
move on?
me. No, it's okay. I don't think that there's a reason that things like Plan B exist.
Yeah.
We know what Plan B is. Emergency contraception.
Yep.
So, take for example, there's a person that I know who I will not name who was on birth control, the depot shot, which is not as effective. It's about 60% effective as opposed to the pill, which is 99% effective when used properly.
Mm-hmm.
She was on birth control and had a pregnancy scare. And so as far as she saw it, she was on birth control. They used a condom. They did everything that they were supposed to do right. And she was petrified because she was like, I could have this baby inside of me. And she personally is pro-life.
Okay.
She didn't want to get rid of the baby. She wanted to either keep it or give it up for adoption. And she was terrified of what was going to happen to her. Not to mention that birth is biologically the most destructive thing that you can do to your body as a woman.
I mean, it looks like it hurts just a little bit.
It's literally the worst thing that you can do to yourself, short of, death. It changes you. It changes your biochemistry. It changes your hormones. It changes the shape of your body and the way you perceive yourself.
Yeah.
And being 16 and already having, when the biggest problem in your life is whether or not your boyfriend's mad at you, and then all of a sudden you've got this kid, there's a huge maturity gap there.
Okay, yeah.
So I think that you have a right to think that it's cruel. I think you have a right to think that it's murder. I just don't have that same perspective.
Which is fine. I can agree to disagree. I just think that when you get to the bottom of it, if you're a teen and you're having sex, you should assume that maturity and that responsibility initially. You should be ready to have a kid if that's what it comes to, because you're taking that upon yourself. And I'm not going to call it a cop out because I don't think it's a cop out.
Yeah.
But it's always the the easier way to go is, okay, well, obviously this is what makes sense for me. If my ambitions, my dreams, this is not part of my plan. This is just budged its way into everything. So I think that the main problem is, abortion. I think it's cruel, and I do think it is murder because the baby can still feel things.
Not in the first trimester.
Well, even though it may not be able to feel things in the first trimester, you talked about, if you don't mind, I'll go back. You talked about how it's your body, it's your right. When you put a syringe, well, a baby's a little bit different than a syringe just because it is its own thing, and even though your body's taking care of it, it's a separate human being.
But it's not. It doesn't have nerve endings that are fully developed. It doesn't have a brain that can process things. It doesn't think. Even an infant that you have birthed out, if you don't feed it, it doesn't eat. And I'm not saying that makes it right to kill it, but it's not the same thing as walking down the street and shooting someone and being I kill you in the face.
No, it's definitely not the same thing. But I still think it's cruel.
But I just cannot fathom how it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have a fully formed heart, it doesn't even have fingers and toes.
Right.
It's got less cell mass than the chickens that we kill to eat. And obviously that's not the same thing. A human baby is not the same as a chicken.
Right.
But when you look at it, there's a reason that you cannot have abortions past the first trimester unless you're going to die if you have the baby.
But abortions past the first trimester is still legal in America.
Only under extreme dire circumstances where either the baby's life is in danger, or the mother's life is endangered, or both.
But that still doesn't make it. But we talked about being past the first trimester, they can still feel pain, so it still makes it cruel at that point. At that point,
but if it's really, really uncommon. it's like exception. I don't know the number. I had the number at one point, but it is only in extreme situations where you've got a mother who's bleeding out on the table and you've got a baby that's not, that their lungs are filled with fluid.
Right.
Where if you don't remove that fetus, the woman or the baby or both will die.
Well, that's different than just, being irresponsible, though. Just if the baby's going to die anyway, that's different. The baby's dead.
But that's why abortions past the first trimester. You can't just go and get one done.
But not all of them are just because the baby's dying.
The majority, I'm actually pretty sure that you're not allowed to take a baby out of someone's belly after the first trimester unless it is deemed of extreme circumstance by your doctor.
What you mean, by the fluid example, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where you've got basically a life-threatening instance for either party involved, mother or child.
Which makes sense. If the mother is in danger of dying and the kid's dying, well then there's an obvious choice there. But that's not an ethical issue, because
it's a logical issue.
Yeah, and I think the difference between normal abortions where there is no health risks pertaining to the mother or the fetus is still just it's an irresponsible way to go, just because of you should assume that responsibility when you're doing something that could result in you having a huge maturity gap. You need to be ready for that.
I think that there is a difference between being pragmatic and being practical. Because practically, all teenagers know the risks of sex. We all know that if you fuck up, you're going to have a kid. But pragmatically, when you're in that moment, and you're sitting there and you're like, this is awesome, and then you get home and you're like, oh shit, I missed my period, I'm late by 4 days. Because we don't have fully developed brains yet, so you can argue teenagers shouldn't be having sex because our brains aren't fully developed, we're not responsible enough. But that's not going to stop us. That's not going to stop anyone. So we have to look at it pragmatically and not practically, and stop thinking about, well, they should do this and they should do that, because they don't. And that's
right.
the fact of the matter. So
and I totally agree with you on that.
So addressing the way it actually is versus how it should be is I have a mother who is very much ideal situations are the only situations she believes in. She is not pragmatic at all in any way, shape, or form. So for me, you have to take into account all of the other factors and all the gray areas and all of the worst case scenarios when you're looking at something like this. And you say, you're right, there's just kids being kids.
Well, yeah, that's true, but still
and for that reason, they shouldn't have a baby.
Well, yeah, at the same sense, though. I mean, not the same sense, but on the same path, the kid should assume that role. I mean, the kid, if they're having sex, which a lot of teenagers end up doing anyway, even though they know the risks, even though they're going into it, fully,
cognizant.
Yeah, they're totally aware of what could happen. They have to be ready for when it, or if it does happen. And I think that if they're going to be in that moment and they're going to take that step, they have to assume the responsibility that comes with that. They can't just be like, oh shit, I had sex and it was nice, but now I have to take care of a kid. Well, yeah, that's what happens when you have sex. So they should have to own up to that responsibility and the choice they made. And just because they were in it and it was fun in the moment doesn't give them a right to take the child's life.
I think that there's a fundamental difference in arguments here.
Yeah.
So the way that this is gonna go is just down the exact same path.
Yeah.
Because
I feel like we have found some common ground, but it's just differences in how you view the baby.
Fine.
Yeah.
Essentially, which is cool. If we have time, I would like just one more, and then we're all good. So I kind of, do you guys want to talk about more immigrants, or you want to go Medicare for all? What do you guys find more intriguing?
Personally, I think Medicare is more interesting. Well, not just Medicare, welfare as well. But
okay.
Yeah.
I can go either way. Whatever is.
I mean, is Medicare the debate? Medicare?
I actually don't have a whole lot of information on Medicare.
Okay.
because...
Or just the welfare state in general of the United States?
Welfare is probably a better topic.
Okay, I mean, we can talk in general about it. So, why don't we start with the welfare state in the United States? I know, I've heard a lot of A lot of economists talk about how, the welfare state is necessary, but I have heard a lot of older economists say we don't need a welfare state. It's useless. And you see that, including in the welfare state is Medicare for All, is, Social Security. Is it worth it? Because I have heard things like the Social Security net's going to be tapped out by 2040. Like, what, as a generation and for us, is it worth it? Like, should we continue this welfare state?
I think that this is another one of those issues that you can approach logically or emotionally. And for me, I think that it's really hard to want to give your money to support somebody else who you may see as being a quote-unquote freeloader. To someone who maybe doesn't work or doesn't have kids, is just kind of single, living alone, or they're living on the streets, they're addicted to drugs. All of these things that most often are pulled up in welfare debates. And I think it's like, well, why am I going to give? I worked so hard for my money, and they didn't do anything. They didn't earn it. They're just getting free money. And I think that it's tricky because, for me, seeing people who live on the street is hard. It's hard for me to see that, because it's one of those things where I know the life that I live is a wonderful, beautiful, privileged life.
Yeah.
I am a cisgender, straight teenage girl in suburban Camarillo in California, which is one of the most tolerant states in the country.
Yeah.
Short of, New York City, which is, I know, not a state, but very liberal.
Yeah.
I have a good, is what I'm trying to say. I live the good life. And it's hard for me to see people who are struggling and know that I could help them. I have the means to help them, but I'm just watching them struggle because I don't want to give them my money, because I feel like everyone deserves to have a good life.
So do you think, okay, so I guess the better question for here is, do you think it's better to raise poor people out of poverty by forcing taxes and actually the welfare state, or charity donations, or how what is the best way to raise people out of poverty?
I think the best way to raise people out of poverty, and something that a lot of people don't know or are not educated on, is that when you are born into a certain class, it's very uncommon that you move out of that class. So if you move into the middle class, the most upward mobility you're going to get is, upper middle class. If you're poor and you're living in the projects and all that you know is, how to make it paycheck to paycheck, and you're fighting for your life every single day, managing money isn't a thing. It's not a skill that you have, because you only have so much money to spend, and then you have to spend it all.
Yeah, I was going to interject. I was going to say that, most, historically, most people that are poor are usually bad with money, and that usually ends them in that position.
They start poor and they stay poor.
Yeah, because they don't know about saving, they don't know about investing, they don't know about multiple incomes, they don't know about those things. But I don't think that it's an excuse sort of to give them the money that, give them welfare, because they're going to end up spending it on stuff that they don't need. If they have a child, for example, they're not going to end up spending what's necessary to provide for their child. They're going to be, spending it on, shit they don't need.
For me, I think the best thing that we can do is to just fucking educate people, man.
Yeah.
Teach them how to manage money. Teach them how to get a job. Make sure that everyone graduates high school. And make sure that when you're in high school, you learn about taxes, and you learn about how to get a job, how to keep a job, how to manage your money when it comes to you. Because when you are so poor that you're eating, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich a day, if you're lucky, you're spending all of your money because that's what you have to do to survive when you're that poor. But also, from not personal experience, but people that I know whose parents make enough money that they're not on welfare, but are living out of motels and are living out of shelters because their parents are addicted to drugs and they spend their money on drugs, and then raise kids that have only that model for behavior. So I think what we have to do is elicit change, and we have to change the way that we view poor people. Because if we just view them as people who are just going to spend all their money on stupid shit, then that's what they're going to do. But if we say, you have potential to be smart, you have potential to be powerful, you have potential to be important, and we're going to teach you how to do that, and we're going to move you out of this cycle of poverty by teaching you how to manage your money and teaching you how to get a job and providing jobs for you to have, and not telling you, well, you're too good to work in the field.
So you're saying reform the system in a sense to where you have more programs to push people into jobs and such compared to just feeding them money and then no guidance?
Yeah, because I think teach a man to fish, not to give him a fish. I don't fucking remember.
Teach a man how to fish, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man how to fish, feed him for a lifetime.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's kind of your concept on the whole system.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's the system that needs to change.
So just to get it straight, you think that that welfare itself is financially wise is misguided, right? It should be spent, better spent on other avenues of. Yeah, I agree with that because I think that
counseling, rehab.
Right, yeah, because welfare doesn't accomplish anything. These are just people who are getting extra money to spend it on extra shit that they don't need. So I agree with you, Asha, when you say that we need to focus on other avenues. So you believe then that welfare is sort of, it doesn't do a good job of what it's supposed to.
I think that it's helpful for people who suddenly lose a job and they have experience in managing money and they say, I just need this for a month or two and then I'm done. I'm going to get my job back.
That is the vast minority of people who.
And
that's the hard part. It is the vast minority.
And I think you can only account for your slowest wheel, right? So you can only account for the people. If you say one person gets welfare, well then everybody asks for it, right?
Yeah.
So you can't. It is a rough issue to talk about, but I think primarily it's not a good use of funds because it goes to people who are inexperienced. So, without them knowing it, or maybe it is conscious, that they are doing these things and, they're spending money that they don't have to spend, that they need to, save or invest or whatever they do to further themselves. I think welfare is a misguided thing.
Yeah. Okay. So since welfare and Medicare are the same thing, Bernie had his Medicare for all. Do you think that
I don't think Medicare and welfare are the same thing.
I would, yeah.
Okay, then on healthcare, the Medicare for all, would you say that's a better replacement for Obamacare? Is Obamacare good the way it is? How do you? Because I know I personally have my own opinion, but this is kind of your debate on how is Obamacare worth it? Should we move to single payer or? Is it better to let the free market do its system type of thing?
I think that when you let the free market do what it wants to do, it screws people over because it wants to make money. So I really don't have a whole lot of knowledge on Obamacare. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on healthcare in general. That's not my forte. That's not the agenda that I push. But I do know that just because you're poor and just because you're a drug addict and just because you are a horrible person does not mean that you don't have the potential to change, and it does not mean that you don't deserve to get the medical help that you need to survive.
Yeah, but that's not everybody, though. So a lot of people that demand Medicare are not just drug unhealthy, but, they're weight unhealthy. These are people that, they only have enough money to buy McDonald's, so that's what they eat, right? And that's very unhealthy for you. And these are also the people that when you demand free healthcare, Obamacare, I think 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, I think it cost the American taxpayer $50 million. Was it upwards of that? I'm pretty sure.
And I know there was an individual mandate where you had to have Obamacare. That's right. That's something that was implemented. Yeah.
Which is forcing both the taxpayer and it's also forcing the doctor to say, oh, here's this 600-pound person. You have to treat this person. Where there's this huge. Oh, well, how the hell am I going to, fix this person that doesn't even take care of themselves? And I think that if people are not willing to take care of themselves, we shouldn't have to take care of them.
I think that, again, if we want to say that, then take those funds. Here's a nutritional program. We're going to make healthy food more affordable for the masses. We're going to give you ways to fix how you're going to do this. We're going to help you learn how to change. That's my perspective. So if we don't like Obamacare, if we don't like what it's doing, figure out a way to change it, make it better.
I think we did fail in a sense. We did push the food pyramid. We did myplate.org. I think we provide enough educational supplies in a sense to promote good eating and such. I think it's more of a personal choice. I know when I want to get fit, I have to not eat McDonald's all the time. Granted, it's the cheaper option, but I know I probably shouldn't, so I'll eat either nothing or I'll drink a lot of water or I'll do whatever.
It's actually interesting that you say that because it is, if you're being savvy about it, if you look at something like chili, which is very protein dense, it's got a lot of people, it's got meat in it, it's cheaper to make a big pot of chili and freeze it and then reheat it up than it is to go to McDonald's.
That's pretty freaking good.
But people don't know that.
No.
Right.
So we need to, instead of saying, well, here's the food pyramid and here's all these things you could do, we need to say, all right, you're broke. You have $20 to get you through the week for food. How are you going to do it? Well, a can of beans costs you 30 cents.
I think it's not necessarily education that's the problem, because assuming a majority of Americans have access to internet and you can go to a library, you have a phone. I do feel in a sense that you can look up like cheap recipes online to feed yourself for a week or something like that. So I don't think the educational materials are there. I do think that in a sense it's more of a personal responsibility. Now, I'm not saying I'm not in favor of healthcare in general. I do feel like we need like a safety net for like pre-existing conditions and stuff that arises, but I do...
Yeah, birth is a pre-existing condition.
Stuff like that. And I the only things I don't like about Obamacare is how long it takes to come out with a new drug and the individual mandate. Because, like, let's say I consider myself a healthy human being. I don't want to be forced to pay a fine because I don't buy into Obamacare, because that hurts younger people. Even though younger people are less likely to have the same conditions as an older person, they might just need basic disastrous coverage in case I break a leg or something extremely bad happens. Which I think a lot of Americans our age are starting to view that as...
And I think the way that our generation views food and views health is a lot different from the baby boomer generation.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that our generation coming up, and millennials, the way that we talk about them kind of looking for handouts and the participation, they don't want to do anything that's not sitting right in front of them.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between their generation and our generation. Our generation is very much
we're on that clear skin
grind.
grind.
I'll Google it.
We're on that clear skin grind. We're finding everything.
So I think, again, as we get older, I'm just kind of like waiting for our generation to become adults, because I think a lot of things are going to change and will become better, because we're definitely we are more willing to pursue alternative options because we're more open-minded.
Yeah. But I think, like, if we're going to talk about that, it's going to be like, it's not an educational thing in this sense, because, a peanut butter jelly sandwich costs like $1.85. And, somebody will still go to McDonald's when they know, like, a PB&J sandwich is much healthier for you. It may not taste as good, but it's better for you. And they'll go and they'll buy a salad at McDonald's, which does fucking nothing, and they'll pour 2,000 calories worth of ranch on it. And they know the difference, but it's just easier. And so they have to, I think it's more of, you can't demand healthcare because somebody is lazy.
Yeah.
You can't say, oh, you have to take care of me because I don't give a shit enough to do it myself.
So then how do we solve that?
Well, you can't solve that. That's a
personal decision.
Exactly.
I don't think we can tell.
But how do we police that? How do we have that?
That's not your responsibility to police.
I don't think healthcare is meant for policing. I think healthcare is meant as a safety net. So I think.
So do you think that you should have to apply for healthcare?
Yeah, I think so. I think if let's say you have type 1 diabetes, like you were born with it, or if you somehow, because we don't know how late onset Alzheimer's works. I think if you have a doctor's recommendation where if you have this pre-existing condition, or if something tragic, like that happened to you, you can apply for healthcare and you can get the benefits. But I feel like it's more on the consumer and on the human being, because I'm a libertarian, so I don't think that the government should be able to kind of control this. Oh, you shouldn't be eating this, so don't eat that because you're on my healthcare. No, I should be able to damn well eat what I want, and if it's my bad health that's on the line, then I damn well did that to myself.
And I think
so. You want tragic disaster for health.
I think
insurance. I have brain cancer and I can't afford treatment.
Yeah, if
that's different than obesity.
If somebody has something serious, I think they should get the help they need. But if it's the hard part I see with Obamacare is the fact that all the certain coverage options require all these different things, when I know people like me or younger people don't need it. Like my sister doesn't need coverage for 3 different types of shots. One that needs that goes in her throat, or I don't even know what it is, but. I think that also what makes healthcare more expensive is there's this example of how if you spend somebody else, like let's say you're in a grocery store and you're spending another person's money, and so let's say, so in this instance you're going to the hospital and they say, oh, you have the flu, but you could have something else you want to test for, blah, blah, blah. And so you get every test that they recommend. You don't care because it's not your money. Well, the hospital is going to run out of stuff quicker, run out of the supplies quicker. So hospital is going to start charging more supply and demand. That's how, checking in for a flu costs like $500. I think if you just need preventative stuff, I think, in most cases, I think healthcare isn't, supposed to be in that.
Yeah. I also think, too, that when healthcare, having free healthcare and demanding that healthcare should be a right does the exact opposite. It's perpetuating unhealthy behavior because, like you said earlier, you have a safety net. You have, I can eat like shit and turn into, a lazy piece of shit, but somebody will still take care of me.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that, which again is another unpopular opinion on the left, there's accountability.
Yeah.
And you are in charge of your body. You are in charge of what you put into your body and the way that affects you. And there's only so much that we can do for you. You are an individual. I think it's different. I think kind of in the way that college works, when you're a lower income family, you get more financial aid.
Yeah.
I think that's something else we could consider
okay.
healthcare people who, going to the doctor's not cheap.
Oh no.
It was $3,000 to get a root canal.
Yeah.
And you can't eat when you're to the abscesses, which it will if you don't get it taken care of. You can't eat.
Oh no.
So I think that there's a fine line between people who are just freeloading and people who actually legitimately need help.
I think that's another debate if we had time. But I would like to thank my good friend Asha and Mr. Ethan Claus for joining me on the show. Until next time, thank you for the debate, and I like to say that both parties like to solve the same issues just in different ways. So thank you. I'm glad we were civil, and next time I'll catch you on the flip side.
All right.